Dear friends, today is my turn to present a very special and very representative guest for me, Dr. Attila Demkó, head of the Center for Geopolitics at Mathias Corvinus Collegium, Budapest, Hungary. Hi, Attila.
Hi, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your agreeing to take part in this interview, because we have a lot of questions on general situation in the world, and of course on the Ukrainian-Hungarian relation, which should be much better than now. Ukrainian-Hungarian relations in recent years are complex and contradictory. In many cases, so on the one hand, the Hungarian people and state have taken in several hundred thousand of Ukrainian refugees starting from the war and provided a significant, very important humanitarian assistance and supported a most program in European Union and NATO countries for Ukraine. As you know, it costed more than 100 million euros for Hungary at the moment. But at the same time, the Hungarian demands regarding the provision of school education in Ukraine in Hungarian language are maybe a matter of contention between our countries, and perhaps even a barrier for Ukraine gain to the status of member of European Union for nowadays. What does Hungary really want in this matter?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity, and it's very important to make a clearer picture for the Ukrainian public, since I think the picture is not clear in Ukraine, and also in Ukraine I think there is a lot of propaganda. Some of it is coming from Russia. So I'm afraid that Russian propaganda is working in Ukraine, it's working in Hungary, and it's happy to see the two countries in a not very good relationship. So the main point is, whatever debates we have, we should talk, and if we don't talk and if we just see each other as a problem, then it serves only one country's interest, and that's not Ukraine and Hungary, and you can find out which country is that. As for the relationship, we have to start in 1991. So Hungary was the second country to recognize Ukraine after Poland. And for Hungary it was very important always, and coming from the first Prime Minister József Antal to Orbán Viktor, that there is an independent, strong Ukraine between us and Russia. And Orbán Viktor also said it many times, and I don't think it's quoted a lot in Ukrainian media. And from 1991, I think until 2014 we had excellent relationship. Maybe the Ukrainians didn't think much about Hungary because it's not Russia, not Poland, so a smaller country. But the view from Hungary was generally positive of Ukraine, and the main reason for that was the good treatment of the Hungarian minority in Zakarpatskoye Oblast. And actually, emotionally, there are many other aspects in the relationship, but emotionally this is the most important. So for Hungary, not only the treatment of the minority itself, so we talk only about the education law and language law, but also the treatment of Hungarian historical places, Hungarian statues and memorials, cemeteries, and the dignity of Hungary is an issue. And I think, of course, you had the revolution of dignity, but many felt in Hungary that the dignity of the Hungarian community was hurt in Ukraine. And I know that it will surprise most of you, but actually that was the impression of Hungary, that a lot of Maidan, or some of the Maidan people, thought that it's the minority languages, the minority cultures are a problem. And I was at the first meeting of Hungarian Minister of Defense and Ukrainian Minister of Defense just before the first invasion of Ukraine, so the Crimea invasion. And I think it was February 2014. And the only thing we asked from Ukraine in return for full support of NATO and the EU is not changing the language and the education situation of the Hungarians, and not changing of the good approach of Ukraine to Hungarian history. And we were very grateful for many things for Ukraine before 2014. And unfortunately, we saw that these pleas, and these were polite pleas at the time, were not listened to in Ukraine. I've been many times in Ukraine, including the Atoll, including Zaporizhia, Dnipro, but many other places at the front lines of Ukraine. So I understand what is aggression and what is war, and it's terrible. And all the complaints we have seem to be small for Ukrainians, since Ukraine is being destroyed every day. And we talk about laws and statutes and these things seems to be small. But for Hungary, it's not really clear why is it so important for Ukraine. Why, for example, the EU languages could not have the same like the Tatar language. That was our proposal, that Hungarian, Polish, Romanian should be like Tatar. And it's also very important to understand, and I don't think it's understood in Ukraine, that Hungarian language is present in what is today Ukraine for 1,300 years. So it's not something which came from Asia or, well, of course, the Hungarian language originally was born in the region of the Ural, but actually the Hungarian nation as a people was born here. What is Hungary? What is Zakarpatskoye Oblast? What is Transylvania?
How long Hungarians live in Zakarpattia?
Well, the Hungarian state was established what is today Zakarpattia. So that's why, for example, the so-called Verecke Pass and the monument of the Verecke Pass is so important for Hungarians, and that monument was attacked several times. We don't know if it was Ukrainian nationalist or Russian provocateur, but it was put on fire, it was damaged by hammer, and when Hungarians go there, and I was there after one attack, they feel bad. So the establishment is 895 according to history, and this is the point of entrance of Hungarians to the historic Hungarian state. So this is in Ukraine. The Verecke Pass, and the first settlement part is Mukachevo, Uzhgorod, Ungvar. So the Hungarians of Zakarpatskoye Oblast, actually the oldest part of, in some ways, we can say, and also Eastern Hungary. So I'm not saying the Hungarians of Zakarpatskoye Oblast are the same as, even linguistically and culturally, as the same of Hungarians of Eastern Hungary. So they have the same dialect. You have to understand this is not a separate group. It's a very old part of historic Hungary, and maybe it's too much to say, but really it's part of our soul. Not in a sense of territorial sense, but the citadel, the fortress of Hust, is a poem. The fortress of Munkács is one of the most heroic struggle of Hungary. So you understand its history.
Has Hungary, on official level, ever claimed this territory to be back to Ukraine?
No.
To be back to Hungary?
No. So it's very important that we had a treaty of friendship, and
because there are a lot of right-wing politicians that say that Hungary is going on to take it from Ukraine, to break the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and there are some politicians in Hungary also right-wing which are trying to make a sign for it.
Yes, it's true. So we have a party which has about 8 to 10% of the vote, which is it's not saying exactly directly, but had such statements which are very unhelpful. So the statement, as I remember, was the re-establishment of Polish-Hungarian
or very useful for Russia.
It's very useful for Russia. But that's about 8 to 10% from the government. From the government of Orban Viktor, and from all the governments starting in 1991, Ukraine was recognized fully within its borders with full territorial integrity and sovereignty, and this is said after the first and second Russian invasion too. So I think it's a big misunderstanding in Ukraine. We accept the border. We are members of NATO and EU anyway, so there is no border change in NATO and EU countries. But we accept the border. there are some forces, and I think they are quoted in Ukraine, who are pretty open, but these forces are maybe 10% of Hungarian society. And we also have to see that Zakarpatskoye Oblast today is 90% non-Hungarian, so it's 10% Hungarian. So there is no, it's not Crimea with 60-some% Russians and Russian speakers. So there is no such a threat. And I think if Ukraine is, because we also heard voices that there should be more military in Zakarpatskoye Oblast, like establishment of new base. Actually, it would serve Russian interests, since it would take Ukrainian attention and force away from the east.
Yeah.
So I believe that this is of course, this is an issue. History, as I said, and maybe I was too long, is an issue. But you have to understand that Ukraine had a terrible hard history, but Hungary also had a terrible hard history. So when I compare the two countries, we have very much the same experiences. You had the Cossacks, we had the Haidus, which were the same, that they fought the Ottomans, they fought, for you that was the Russians and the Ottomans, we had, and the Tatars, we had the Tatars, the Ottomans and the Habsburgs, and we had the same freedom fights. And the Hungarian, middle of Hungary, including Budapest, where we are sitting now, was destroyed the same way as Kiev was destroyed by the Tatars, or as much of Ukraine was destroyed, and it was resettled actually after the reconquest of the 18th century. So much of Hungary is resettled. What is not resettled, for example, is Zakarpatska. So they lived there for more than 1,000 years. Budapest is basically it's a 300-year-old town in many ways. It's a 1,000-year-old town, or even 2,000 years with the Roman town, but like Odessa. So you have to understand the similarities, but also we have an extremely strong sense of belonging together, since the Hungarian state existed without interruption for more than 1,000 years. So when I say 895, the Hungarian state existed till today, even within the Habsburg monarchy, because the Habsburg monarchy was the kingdom of Hungary and Austria and other principalities. But the kingdom of Hungary always existed. So we have a very, very strong sense of being united, and that's why what happens in Zakarpatskoye Oblast or in Transylvania or wherever comes to Budapest immediately. So it's not about the borders, but it's about, as I said, about dignity, about freedom of speaking the language, many other things, and these are very emotional.
But it looks like you also have damage after the First and Second World War, when the territory of settlement of Hungarian people were cut. A lot of Hungarians are now abroad, and sometimes it looks the Hungarians feel something like a sentiments to that time.
But it's very not natural. So if Ukraine would lose this war, and Ukraine would lose more than half of its territory, I think Ukraine, after 100 years, would feel the same sentiment. So to say, sometimes they say that it was a just settlement, but actually the borders are not the ethnic borders. The borders are railway lines and rivers. And basically all the railway lines and important rivers and mines were taken from Hungary, not only the people. So there were 10 million Hungarians in old Hungary, and 3.5 million were transferred to the neighboring countries without any vote. There was only one country
after the First World War.
After the First World War, and there was only one country. The border is established with a vote. That's Austria. And the people, even the German-speaking, mostly voted for Hungary. Because it was a 1,000-year-old state with a big tradition. So Hungary is not only a country, it's in the stones of a 1,000-year-old, very prestigious country. Maybe it's not known in Ukraine, but if you look at the map of Europe, mostly you will find Hungary. So this must be understood. The biggest shock for Hungary was not Zakarpatskoye Oblast, but Transylvania, which is now
it is part of Romania.
Part of Romania, which had at the time 1.7 million Hungarians. Today it's 1 million. So when we are speaking about education, we see a terrible assimilation of our people. We see disappearance town after town. So that's why we are, maybe it's not understood in Ukraine well, but that's why we are so nervous when schools are because the Romanians did the same. Well, you don't need this schooling, you must learn Hungarian. So they first disbanded the university. There was of course, in Hungary, there was a Hungarian university in Transylvania. They disbanded the university first, then they started with the middle schools, and at the end, in the Ceausescu regime, they even started to attack the primary schools. So we had bad experience, and I see that many Ukrainians think it's good intentions from Ukraine that Hungarians should learn Ukrainian, and I agree. Hungarians should learn better Ukrainian. That's a problem. But forcing will not work. I have to, please let me give you one personal example. I was forced to learn Russian for 6 years because we were occupied, of course, by the Soviet Union against our will in 1945 and again in 1956. And they introduced Russian into our schools. You know who learned Russian in Hungary?
No.
Nobody. I learned for 6 years. I speak a little. I understand a little. At 6 years, 4 hours every day, we resisted. And if there is an outside pressure to learn a language, it will be immediately resisted. So it should be more like, done in a clever way. And I think the Ukrainian approach was more like forcing than a clever selling of the goods. Because it's a good thing to speak, of course, well, the state language. It's not a question. But forcing and being impatient, Hungarians are very stubborn, and the Russians and the Soviets learned it the hard way because we were the first to rise against them. And when you come to Budapest, and I really advise, one of the biggest Soviet military cemeteries are here because it was a very big fight in 44 and 45, and also in 56. So it's not about Hungary being pro-Russian or liking the Russian. It's unfortunate the problem on an emotional level is between the two countries.
Coming back to nowadays, what Hungary now want is the sphere of school education? What your clear demands for now?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that what Hungarian government said, that until the end of the war, we don't want this issue to be disturbed, since Ukraine has much more important things to do than to deal with the school issue, to deal with the languages. So we understand, of course, it's a massacre of people, it's destruction of town after town. So the laws are not important. And but our problem now that it's becoming not only the same, but it's becoming worse. So we see that even more steps are taken, and I understand that Ukrainians don't like that Hungarian government does not provide weapons to Ukraine. I understand that Ukrainians don't like it. But the problem is that we see that because the Ukrainians don't like Budapest policy, they are punishing the local Hungarians. That's
Ukrainian citizens.
Yes, who are Ukrainian citizens who are fighting for Ukraine, and to me, it's like again a very unwise policy from Ukraine to punish Subcarpathian and Zakarpatskoye Oblast Hungarians. There was a removal of a statue in Mukachevo, in Munkac, that was emotionally very hard to swallow for Hungarians. And again, I understand that in Ukraine there are full towns destroyed, so it's nothing in that bigger context. But you must understand that most Hungarians has no idea really what is happening on the front lines. I do, because I have been there. But most people just don't follow the news. They deal and they hear this more. So it's a problem, of course, that we don't focus on the war enough of how terrible the war is. But also sometimes we feel, actually, President Zelensky made some very big thing in 2019, and very positive thing with Hungary. Is just saying a few Hungarian words, not to Hungary, but to the local Hungarian community. I think wishing a Merry Christmas or a Happy New Year in Hungarian, and that won the heart. So President Zelensky won the heart of the Hungarians in Zakarpatskoye Oblast, and also in Hungary. So Peter Szijjártó commented very highly of.
He made it on all languages of national minorities.
Yes, but again, Hungarians listened to what was given to Hungary. So even if it was all to the national minorities, it was taken as a good step.
Okay, Hungary wants to save their system of school education in their native language. What compromises with Ukraine are you ready for?
So I think it's very important to see that, and you were quite right to point out that there is a Ukrainian minority in Hungary also, a small one. Yeah. So we speak about the original. We speak about a few hundred people originally in 2 villages. But we have now at least 100,000 Ukrainians in Hungary as refugees, and some of them actually are staying. So, or maybe staying longer.
And they may become a new minority in 10 years and 20 years.
So it's very important that Hungary officially recognizes Ukrainian minority officially, which means that Ukrainian minority can use the flag, can use the national symbols, like the trizub, in Hungary freely, everywhere. You will see many Ukrainian flags now in Budapest. Most of them are not for the minority, but for, let's say, to support Ukraine. But it officially can be used. So it's not just, not a problem, but it's officially promoted to be used for the minority.
I know there are also many of Ukrainian monuments in Hungary.
Yes, there is the statue of Taras Shevchenko. In the middle of, next to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there is the statue of Prince of Kiev in Tihany, and I think her grave was found, so it's maybe a pilgrimage site for Ukrainians in the future. And of course, we would be very happy to have the Ukrainian flag around it, to have a Ukrainian inscription. We are very happy. So what I'm proposing maybe that we had a friendship treaty 30 years ago, which worked very well until 2014, that we should establish everything in a treaty of friendship in terms of we are giving the same in Hungary for Ukrainians, what the Ukrainians give in Ukraine for Hungarians.
Mirror steps. So Hungary may be ready for opening Ukrainian language study schools, something like this.
Well, I'm not a government official.
I know, but we are like an expert.
As an expert, I would very much support Ukrainian schools for the Ukrainian refugees. Now there are Ukrainian children in 1,300 schools in Hungary, but they learn mostly in Hungarian. There are language courses, of course, to keep Ukrainian language, but we should have fully Ukrainian schools in Hungary, which means that they would learn everything in Ukrainian, in my view, except for as a foreign language, the Hungarian. So that's pretty much something which is, I think, the Hungarian government. We had the same agreement with Croatia. So the Hungarians in Croatia and the Croats in Hungary have the same level of education with the same rights, use of flag, use of language. So I think, and it's a very good, well-working agreement with Croatia. If I go to Croatia, I can see in the school Hungarian flag, Croat flag, Hungarian coat of arms, Croat flag, and the same in Hungary. We are in Europe. It shouldn't.
You are together in NATO.
We are together. I'm hopeful that one day we will be together with Ukraine in NATO and EU, but not without solving this problem. And the same with Slovenia. It doesn't hurt Slovenia. Same with Austria. With Romania, Slovakia, there is a problem, but with Serbia, we had terrible relationship. Now the Hungarians in Serbia, it's about 250,000 people. We lost that territory also at the end of the First World War. They enjoy even cultural autonomy, which means that they have their own curriculum of teaching. Not only teaching and it doesn't hurt Serbia at all. Hungary doesn't want to, because there are Hungarians in every neighboring country. Every neighboring country has some of what we see, of course, as historic Hungarian land. So we will not. That's one of the reasons. I mean, Hungary would have from Austria. Every country got something in at the peace treaty of Trianon.
How is your attitude to the Romanian scenario? What I mean, Romania and Ukraine made an agreement that all these language problems will be resolved after the war.
Yeah, I think it's a good approach. Again, I think the war is the most important for Ukraine. We have to acknowledge that all these problems are tiny compared to destruction of Bakhmut or Avdiivka or Pesky. I've seen Pesky even before was destroyed. I cannot imagine how it looks like. Of course, it's a small problem, but again, and I'm trying to approach it from a Ukrainian side. For Ukrainian interest, it's very important to have no problems within the EU and NATO. And I think Ukrainians unfortunately see Hungary as isolated and weak. And that's why they think that they can do whatever they want with Hungary. And I think it's not wise. Not wise because Hungary is, of course, maybe Austria is the only other country in EU which doesn't provide weapons, but it's not so isolated in many things. And again, I think with Poland, if you look at the map, and it's important to look at the map, the best roads to the west goes through Poland, but the second best road system to the west goes through Hungary. And Ukrainians should know that the grain of Ukraine is going through Hungary before the war 40,000 tons, now 2 million tons.
It's near one. Is 20% of Ukrainian grain which is exported every year.
Yeah, it's Hungarian railway system.
Much.
What is not known by Ukrainians, it should be known that 2.5 million cars were using Hungarian fuel in Ukraine the last year, and it's not Hungarian data; it's Ukrainian data.
But it's not Hungarian fuel. It's like it looks like it's Russian fuel.
Yes, and this is the most, and this is what I think Ukrainians should understand, that relatively okay relations between Hungary and Russia allow Russian oil to come to Hungary and Slovakia. The Slovak oil company is also in Hungarian hands. So it's the MOL oil company. It's refined in Hungary and it's sent back to Ukraine to fuel cars and maybe even tanks. So it's not only humanitarian aid what Hungary is giving, and I think Ukraine is paying for this. But Hungary is also paying a big money for the transfer of the oil, so it's beneficial for both countries, but in a way very beneficial for Ukraine. So many of the viewers and listeners has Hungarian diesel oil in their cars, which is partly made of Russian oil. This is, of course, sounds terrible. But practically, it's good for Ukraine to have diesel oil. No, because otherwise it would be much harder, because we have a pipeline system connecting, and you don't have a pipeline system from the United States.
Almost all years of the war, we used Russian diesel to our tanks every time. What is the story behind about the Viktor Orban's visit to Ukraine? It was announced that the visit will be, then it was announced that the visit will not be, before Ukraine will not resolve the problem with the teaching in school.
So again, I'm not a government official. I cannot really tell you much about it. That's for sure that the Hungarian president visited Ukraine. It was not a big news in Ukraine, but she visited Kiev. And I think there is a plan for Viktor Orban to visit Ukraine. I think, I cannot speak on behalf of Viktor Orban, but reading his statements, he has a high appreciation for bravery of Ukrainian people. I don't think it's ever quoted in Ukraine, but he said it many times. And he has an appreciation for the bravery, personal bravery of President Zelensky, because it was a personal bravery what happened in the first days of the invasion in February 22. And actually, I think it should be. Unfortunately, I see that always the bad things are quoted in Ukraine, and the good things said by Hungarian leaders are not quoted in Ukraine, like support for territorial integrity, sovereignty, and of course, acknowledging the heroism of the Ukrainian military, of the Ukrainian people, and of course, the personal bravery of President Zelensky. I think there are negotiations. It's much of politics is behind the scenes. I saw a news yesterday that the number 2 of the foreign ministry is going to Ukraine. Here at MCC, we invited Pavlo Klimkin. He had a speech yesterday at this very exact location where we are, and he had a great speech, and we had some great talks, and he met Hungarian also politicians. So we are trying to engage Ukraine. I think the government is trying to engage Ukraine. We as a think tank trying to engage Ukraine. And I think it's very good that we are talking now.
And in Ukraine, and not only in Ukrainian media, and not only in Ukrainian media, Hungary is often called the Russians and Putin's advocate. Reminding the numbers of attempts to block the sanctions, create exceptions from these sanctions, and continue trade with the Russian Federation. How can this policy be explained, and how important are Russian energy resources for Hungary nowadays?
So actually, Hungary voted for all 10 sanction packages. and Hungary voted in the UN always with Ukraine, so not with one exception. As for the exceptions we asked is the pipeline oil, which I said just before that it's going back to Ukraine too in the form of diesel oil. And we asked for, and we were very much against gas, natural gas. You have to understand a peculiar Hungarian thing that we changed from coal to natural gas in the 70s and 80s almost completely. So we are not like Poland, which means also that the air is much clearer. So in Budapest, maybe you experienced that. So we changed, and unfortunately in the 70s and 80s, we had much more natural gas in Hungary. So we had our own fields. We still have our own fields, but our own fields provide only about now 20% or even less, and not very good quality gas. And unfortunately, we don't have ports. So there is only one LNG port, which is in Croatian hand, near Rijeka on the Adriatic Sea, and it's not enough for Hungary. So unfortunately, we need Russian gas. We are trying to change from Russian to, we have agreements now with Azerbaijan. We are trying to create more geothermal energy in Hungary. But of course, we have this dependency, and we ask for to have this out of the sanctions. And of course, we had some. I think we voted for more than 1,200 people to be sanctioned, and companies, and we asked for until now one Patriarch Kirill, which I understand was taken very badly in Ukraine, but it's still one person from more than 1,000. So that's the reality of that. So Hungary is basically, in terms of votes and sanctions, is 99% like the others. Belgium asked for diamonds to be exempted. Greeks asked for shipping to be exempted. So it's not. I think
it's not only Hungarian policy.
No, and the difference between diamonds and natural gas and oil that we cannot live without heating, while the Belgians could live without the Antwerpen diamond makers could live without the diamond. So that's a big difference. And also, I think the issue of arms is I understand it's taken badly by Ukraine, but we offered training for military medical personnel, and we offered healing for Ukrainian soldiers. Actually, we are doing it since the beginning of the war, which means since I think 2015 or 14. So many Ukrainian soldiers were healed in Hungary. So even that is not, but the dependency is there from Russia, and it was very clear when Bulgaria moved against Russia that they cut the gas. They play hardball, and we know that very well. But Hungary is trying to be more self-sufficient. It's not going to be fast, but we are trying.
Gas is important, of course, I understand it, but why did Hungary not support the European Union program for the supply of shells to Ukraine, and even the European Union statement on the order of the International Criminal Court on the Putin?
Again, and this is very new, and I'm not a government official, but I can tell you that it's not only there is an issue with some of with the Commission and Hungary that also plays a part on what kind of policy Hungary is making, and of course again there is an issue with what I said, energy security. But I cannot give you a clear answer. I personally think that we can help Ukraine many ways, and financial help and food, grain export. This is also kind of important. And anyway, we will contribute to this budget, but we asked that the money, because it's not only for Ukraine, this budget. There is a military budget for Ukraine. I think for the first two packages, we provided money directly to Ukraine. We are providing money for the Balkans. But actually, that money we are providing to the Balkans, the other countries will provide to Ukraine. So it just works. You have to understand that most Hungarian people have, or at least majority believes it's an aggression. About 2/3 of the people blame Russia for the aggression. And there is less sympathy for Russia than in Slovakia or
I've
Bulgaria.
never seen even one Russian flag in Budapest.
There is no Putin picture, there is no Russian flag. You would be very surprised. If you go to Belgrade or if you go to Sofia, you will see much more pro-Russian things.
Of course.
In Hungary, there is nothing. It's not being pro-Russian. Again, I have to tell you, it's not liking the Ukrainian policy.
I'm feeling it here. Hungarians are not pro-Russian at all, but a lot of things we should to make clear for our audience.
Yeah. Again, I want to be very honest with you and with the audience. So there is a very strong Hungarian, let's say, sensibility to the Hungarian minority and that's why a lot of people now, they are not pro-Russian in a cultural way or in a sympathy way, but they see Ukraine as a bigger threat, how strange it sounds, than Russia, because Russia is far away and Ukraine is next door, and some Ukrainian politicians were talking about deporting the Hungarians, and some Ukrainian politician took down a Hungarian statue, took down the Hungarian flags, took down the Hungarian inscriptions in Zakarpattia. So, Ukraine is big and close. Russia is big and far away. That's...
And for me, it also looks like there are many other people who are trying to play in this game between Hungary and Ukraine. From the regional elites, like at Baloga and so on in Ukraine, then ending the Soros and his circumstance, who has a good influence on Ukrainian media. Sometimes a lot of people who are playing around Hungary and playing around Ukraine.
I think for some people in Ukraine,
and this influence is not always good. Sometimes this influence from that person is very bad.
Mr. Baloga was instrumental in creating that statue and rebuilding the statue, because that statue was destroyed, by the way, by the Soviets. So the original of the statue was taken down by the Czechs, then destroyed by the Soviets. So Mr. Baloga repeated what the Soviets did to us. And actually, but he was, in 2008, he helped to rebuild the statue. And now he wants to prove his very strong Ukrainian patriotism with being anti-Hungarian, because he can do it with much less problem if he says the same about the Russians. And I cannot show a picture of Mr. Baloga with Mr. Orban, but I can show you a picture with Vladimir Putin. So maybe he had some close relationship to Russians, and then now he shows his strong patriotism with attacking the Hungarians.
Maybe the problem was just smuggling.
Yeah,
And there are a lot of questions in the border in Zakarpatsky.
Yes, it's very easy to be patriotic with attacking a country which will have a limited opportunity and to attack back. And I think for him it's an instrument. And he is one of the persons who put a lot of stuff into Ukrainian media. Some of them is true. So I think there are many articles in Hungary which are unwise or ignorant. And I have to admit that most Hungarians are very ignorant about Ukraine. 99% of Hungarians never traveled beyond Subcarpathia. So maybe they know Ungvar, Uzhgorod or Munkács, Mukachevo, but they have no idea about how beautiful Kiev is, how beautiful Odessa is. I've been, but I don't know any other person who have been more Kiev, yes, but to Odessa, which is, I think, a fantastic town, very few been from Hungary.
I absolutely agree. We should to discover each other, even taking account that we are neighbor for the centuries. And how stable is the political situation in Hungary? Viktor Orban is already 16 years old this year, will be. Is there any signs of search for a new leader of the ruling party in Hungary?
So you have to understand, and this again connected to Hungarian-Ukrainian relations, that Fidesz is in power now for 12 years, and there was a 4-year period from 1998 to 2002 when Fidesz was in power and Viktor Orban was prime minister. So it's going to be 16 or more than 16 years. So what the political situation is, Fidesz won the election again with a big vote. Around half of the voters voted for Fidesz. and the projections were much smaller, or relatively smaller for Fidesz. And I think the Ukraine war played a part, because the opposition was very strong in supporting Ukraine with weapons and with everything, and most Hungarian people felt, partly because of the relations since 2014, that it wouldn't be wise, and many voted. And I think some Ukrainian policy mistakes were also playing a part for the big victory of Fidesz, since Ukraine supported the opposition. And I understand that
in official level.
Well, it was very, very visible that the ambassador supported the then ambassador. Now you have an excellent embassy. I have the highest appreciation for the Ukrainian embassy, but the ambassador, I think, made a mistake. She's not in Hungary anymore. And I think Ukrainian politics also made, because election time is always, especially it looked to be a very contested election. It's emotional. And of course, I understand that the war is far more emotional than an election campaign, but still, we live in peace. We don't understand, and it helped not the opposition to feel that Kiev wants to have the opposition to be in power, because many Hungarians said, "Oh, somebody from outside wants the opposition to be in power. Okay, we vote for the government or the current government." You understand, this is human nature. Also, there was a lot of support from the opposition, from the United States and from other countries, and most Hungarians say, if somebody is supported from the outside, then I will vote for the current government. So it's not a magic. I think Ukrainians would feel the same if somebody is supported from the outside to vote for the other, just because of patriotism or
because of patriotism in opposition with this influence.
Yeah, I think the opposition has made a big mistake in a sense of internal politics. I understand their opinion was to have full support for Ukraine. The opposition leader said that Hungary is willing to send soldiers within a NATO mission to Ukraine. It was not even a question. But he said that. So again, that's what also Ukrainians must understand, that Hungarian society is also split. So there is a big support for Ukraine, especially in Budapest, and especially in more liberal areas of the countries, while the conservative, patriotic areas are more looking inward and want to stay out of the war. It's a very strong feeling to stay out, because people are afraid of nuclear war. People are afraid of escalation. So that's their feeling. And I understand Ukrainians want support from everyone, full support. But again, this is a reality in Hungary, that majority of the people will not support giving lethal weapons. They will support healthcare. They will support humanitarian aid, giving the refugees everything. But just stay out of the war. It's a very strong feeling in Hungarian society.
Because of scary to be involved in the war.
In the First World War, we lost 2/3 of our land. We had 500,000 refugees thrown especially from Romania. They lived on the outskirts of Budapest in shanty towns. The Second World War, again, a tragic, very tragic situation with hundreds of thousands of dying. Budapest was destroyed very badly. And I understand Poland had the similar situation, but Poland is neighboring Russia. And Hungary, if we look at the map, is very far from Russia. So we have a different geopolitical situation. Hungary is looking to the south very much because of migration. We had 500,000 people marching through our country in 2015. You could see it was like in a movie in Budapest. So Hungarians have not only Russia, not only the east, but the south too. So we have a different geopolitical position than the Baltic states or Poland, or even Romania, because Romania is in a way bordering Russia, and Romania has Moldova. So if you think that Romania is innocently supporting Ukraine, then Romania is eyeing Moldova all the time of creating greater Romania. They are also sometimes eyeing the Snake Island. So you have to understand this is a bigger. There are many layers of this. And I don't want to be rude, but sometime a Baltic advisor, very high-level advisor, told me that they are very happy that the war is in Ukraine, because until the war is in Ukraine, it's not in the Baltic countries. So it's innocent help for Ukraine, just for good heart from Baltic countries. I'm not sure about that, or Poland. I have the highest appreciation, especially for Poland. Don't get me wrong, but it's never so. What Ukraine gets as an aid is not just a gift, and I think Ukrainians should understand that they are not getting a gift. There are reasons and interest behind, and it's not just from the good heart. And I think Ukraine also will pay a price not only for the aid and the weapons, but generally in economics. So it's a much more nuanced and gray situation in that sense. But there is one thing for sure, that it's a Russian aggression, pure and simple. But the support for Ukraine will have a price.
As a political expert, how do you see the further development of events in Europe in the context of Russian-Ukrainian war? What threats of stability and unity for Europe do you see now?
I think the situation is getting worse. Not only, of course, the aggression in Ukraine is the most important, but the Balkan situation, which is again very much the map's not showing that south of Hungary is not good. I'm going to Serbia this weekend, so I will know more about this, but it was a very tense situation between Kosovo and Serbia. There is very tense situation sometimes inside Bosnia. There is very tense situation with migration. I think there are issues in Turkey. So the Ukrainian war is like the skyscraper from all problems. And there are much smaller things, but they can grow. And also, I think there is a general problem, economic problem in the West. There is a general economic problem in China. And if the Chinese and the Americans and the Europeans are sick economically, that can create also a firestorm. So we have I call it myself the crisis of the 21st century. So maybe I could copyright it. I wrote about this, the crisis of the 21st century, or the 7 lean years. The 7 bad years are coming. And Ukraine is already in a terrible situation. But in Hungary, we are afraid that the other crises are coming back up, and one of the reasons we are not, it's the smaller reason, we are not giving weapons to Ukraine, because we are arming ourselves to the teeth. So the Hungarian weapons program is, of course, not as big as the Polish, but it's very big. So we are buying the latest equipment from Germany, and we are making the factories too. We are preparing for a
Rheinmetall.
Rheinmetall is basically a close ally of Hungary. So there was talk that even some things will be made for Ukraine in Hungary, and if it's an export, I think that's a possibility. We have like 3 or 4 Rheinmetall factories under construction, and they will be online. One is online, which is making the best infantry fighting vehicle possibly in the world, together with Puma. It's called the Lynx. It's being made now in Hungary. The first country to introduce it to the army is Hungary. This is a 42-ton infantry fighting vehicle, much better defended than the best Russian tank, because it also has active defense, not only the
on the sides,
on the steel and the armor. So again, this is not very well known in Ukraine, I think, but Hungary is becoming a serious player in terms of military industry and military too. So it's not just a small and insignificant country, because we were one of the first to see in 2015, seeing the migrant crisis, that the good old world is over. Not only in Ukraine, but in the south too. So we face a crisis in terms of Hungary, east and south at the same time. And I think it's true for Europe. It's not only the east, but the south is a crisis situation too.
But as I know, not only the Western industry comes to Hungary, but also Eastern. China is also building a big enterprise here.
Yes,
maybe the biggest.
Yeah, but China is not military industry. So in terms of military, we have 3 countries we cooperate, and it's, please, Ukrainian.
Be very careful.
Ukrainian viewers, I'm telling it to you, it's not Russian. We don't do anything. We change from the Soviet completely. It's German, Israeli, and Turkish. So we are cooperating with these 3 countries, and partly with the United States.
And batteries from China.
Yes, but that's not military. Yes, so Hungary, it's a big debate now in Hungary. In Eastern Hungary, there is the biggest such battery factory, I think, in the world, is being built for 8 billion euros, next to one of the biggest BMW factories in the world, which is it's like for kilometers you see the two factories. So actually Hungary is a factory country. Mercedes-Benz country, Audi country, Suzuki country, Opel country, battery country, Rheinmetall country. So it's not what you think. It's not just Budapest and good food and maybe good music or the big planes, but it's a lot more.
What are the key interests and fears of European Union countries now, and how nowadays the interest of European countries is suits to the interests of United States and Great Britain? What is going on inside of Western Bloc?
So I think there is a problem of losing independent thinking, and Hungary is not popular because we think independently and we are ready to tell our opinion like a devil's advocate within the European Union. And I think we need sometimes independent thinking. But I think many of the views of the US and sometimes the UK is taken for granted. I'm not saying that the Americans are not right many times, because they were right with the Russian aggression and the Europeans were wrong.
Yeah,
I was wrong. I felt really silly when the Russians recognized the Donbas republics, because then I realized that there will be war. But unlike you, who realized it months before, I realized that there will be war 3 days before. And this is a big mistake from an analyst, I have to admit. And the Europeans made a big mistake of misunderstanding Russian intentions. And that's why we are now following, or most European countries following US. And the Americans were again right. But it's always the American interest is the same as the European, I'm not sure. And also Europe needs much more internal strength. And so I personally really believe that we have to rearm Europe. I'm very much for cooperation within Europe, of rearmament, of getting stronger European Union, because we cannot rely on the US forever. And I think it's a big advice to Ukraine. Of course, you're in a much harder situation since you need America, but America has a choice. America has a choice to be in Europe or not to be in Europe, because America is defended by two oceans. It's the basic rule of geopolitics that America is a fortress. Europe is a peninsula, and if they have any internal reasons or external reasons, it's a dangerous situation, especially dangerous for Ukraine, but also dangerous for Europe. And we don't know who will be the next American president. You have to, and of course I think you understand, but and maybe most of Ukrainians understand, but and I think President Biden is a very experienced president. So we have to see that his life is like 60 years of fighting the Soviet Union, understanding Russia. But who is next? Anyone else next is not going to have this experience and these instincts what President Biden has. If it's Donald Trump, for that reason, he has a different vision for the US. If it's Ron DeSantis, if it's Kamala Harris or whoever, or if it's Biden, that's okay for Ukraine. But this is a much more, many more futures than only one future. That Richard Holbrooke said that America became a European power in a totally new sense in 1995 with the Dayton Peace Agreement. Yes, America is the biggest European power, the strongest, including Russia. So America is stronger than Russia. But America gives the strength of 80% of NATO. 80% of NATO is America. Can you imagine NATO without full backing of America? Even if the half of American strength looks to China or to wherever. Where is the strength of NATO then? So Hungarian thinking, again, is much more nuanced and much more future-oriented than many believe. It's because from the outside, from Ukraine scene, it's a country which is like, as you said, doing the bidding of sometimes of Russia. No, Hungary is doing the bidding of its own. And we are very open about this, that we are a sovereign country within the EU and NATO, but we will not say and do every time what we are told to do or say.
What is the role of Great Britain in this situation? How do you think?
I think the UK is an extremely important country, an extremely potent country in terms of intelligence. Militarily is also comparatively to the Germans, it's a potent country. I have very high regard for British culture, and I'm going to London next week. I love London, to be very honest with you, one of my favorite towns. But still, they are an island and they are safe. So again, geopolitics. The Brits can have a much bigger leeway, room of maneuver than any other European country because they have the English Channel between them and continental Europe. So they had much more leeway to resist Hitler, they had much more strength to resist Napoleon, and they have much more strength and independence to resist Putin. Yes, but they have the English Channel. For Hungary, we don't have English Channel. For the Baltics, they don't have English Channel. So sometimes I feel that the Brits are too brave and too aggressive. I understand that they were basically attacked by Russia, since the Skripal case is a terrible thing, or what happened with the polonium poisoning before. So these are terrible cases, and I understand the Brits felt very bad about this. But sometimes I feel that they are even braver than the United States in resisting Russia. And if they give advice to Ukraine, I'm not sure it's always the wise advice. But I don't see the cards. I don't see the cards. I have high appreciation for the UK, but the geopolitical situation is simply different.
How dangerous is the cooperation between China and Russia?
Very. To be very short, I think we underestimate this. I think it started a long time ago, and it's not out of the blue. I tell you one example. Before the invasion of Georgia, which was the first really invasion to stop NATO, it was after the Bucharest summit, it was during the Beijing Olympics. But before, a few days before it happened, Russia gave up territory to China. So when you hear Russia giving up territory to any other country, and it happened a few days, that was a long negotiation, and Russia gave up like a few hundred square kilometers. But there was a war before that, the Ussuri River between China and the Soviet Union. For that same time, Russia gave it up. And what we know of not for sure, because you are sure when you are inside the room and you hear yourself. So I'm in this business for a quarter of a century, and I heard a lot of rumors. But I think Russia had cooperated before the invasion of Ukraine. And if one country was asked for not permission, but at least cooperation, that was China. And China China is a very important country, extremely talented people. But you have to understand that Chinese are very frustrated with the West for historical reasons. I'm a historian partly by training. China has some reasons to be frustrated with the West because of colonial adventures, because of humiliations. And I think now they feel it's time to repay. And Russia's aggression in Ukraine, I'm not saying it's good for China, but it can be now, because we don't see what will happen in the future. But if Russia is not fully defeated and doesn't change the regime in Russia, then Russia will be even more dependent on China. So China will get Russian resources, Russian technology, because Russian technology in some segments are still superior than Chinese, like submarines, maybe engines for fighter planes. And Russia and Ukraine will get more and more Russian resources instead of Europe, cheap resources. So who is it giving advantage? It's giving advantage to China against the West, because US resources, US gas will be always more expensive than Russian gas. So these calculations are not always made. And of course, again, for Ukraine, it's survival. That's number one, or the number one thing to do. But for other countries, it's a word. Everybody, at the end of the day, we can talk about international system. We can talk about rule-based order. It's over. So every country is for itself. This globalization pattern, which happened before, is over. What I think we will see separate, and it's an American idea, I read it in an American assessment, separate silos, separate words. So it's not going to be the Ruski mir,
Mhm.
it's going to be the Chinese mir, and Russia within the Chinese world. And there will be an American, hopefully a European world, but it means a totally different new world in the next few decades. And I'm afraid it's going to be a much more challenging world.
Thank you very much to Dr. Attila Demkó, head of the Center of Geopolitics at Mathias Corvinus Collegium, Budapest, Hungary. Thank you a lot for participation in this program. Thank you, colleagues, friends, and viewers for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will add you a few articles of Attila Demkó to the description of this video to know better and wider about his very important work. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.